Well, you know, when you go with your gut doesn't care about the law or social norms or anything that might get in the way of you following your gut. Uh, it's like if you had a premonition that a plane was going to crash, would you call the airline and tell them not to fly the plane? Probably not, but and it's a weird thing. I mean, I'm not saying it's a common thing. Uh, but what if the plane went down? How would you feel? You uh, because of social norms, you wouldn't call the airline because of social norms. The airline wouldn't cancel the flight. So, it's kind of like that Twilight Zone episode or the movie Twilight Zone with the gremlins on the wing, and the guy in the plane sees the gremlin, and the gremlin is ripping up the wing and trying to crash the plane. And because the guy goes crazy on the plane, they land the plane and they find that the wing is ripped up. So it's kind of like that, and your gut feeling is not something to be played with. It's something to train. You can train yourself to do better. You can train yourself to learn how to listen to your gut. And um, it's just when you're in the lower vibrations of the world, when you're a drug dealer or just a bad person, or you just take the easy way out of life, like a drug dealer does. It's easy to sell drugs. Drugs sell themselves. It's not like you're selling snowballs to Eskimos. So it sells itself. So it's not really a hard job. And you make a lot of money, a lot of risk, and you put people that you're selling it to at risk. So it's not a good job. And you know, people that uh, do think marry women because of their money, or marry men because of their money, or taking the easy way out of life, you know, and always looking for that. Who's got the shiny car? Who's got the bigger watch, the more expensive watch, the more expensive the Gucci clothes, stuff like that. But and it's not having Gucci clothes that's the problem. It's how you get it. You look at a lot of these political people or people that work for the government that have connections to money, and you find that when they embezzle money out of the government or out of a company, they run off and they buy Rolexes. They go on trips to the islands. They buy fur coats. They buy nice cars. That's usually how they get busted because, like, hey, buddy, you make $40,000 a year. How'd you get that watch? You know, I want to know the secret so I can get one too. That's the whole idea, and they can't tell the secret because it's illegal. You know, and people get a gut feeling about this guy that he goes on trips that nobody else in this office can afford. It's like I'm going to Pennsylvania and camping, and this guy's going to the Bahamas. It's like the dichotomy doesn't work. I remember a school teacher at my school, and he was selling heroin, and he was a heroin dealer, and he was also a school teacher. And he had a house in Old Westbury, a very rich neighborhood. He went on big trips, and he's a school teacher. School teachers back then didn't make any money, so that's why he was a heroin dealer because he didn't make any money. He paid for it. And he lost his job. He lost his career. He lost his old best friend address. He lost everything. The cops found kilos and kilos of heroin in his house. And everybody was like, "Oh, he was such a nice guy." They were all surprised. Some were surprised, some weren't. People that knew that he was doing these trips and stuff, they're like, "Oh, that's how he did it." It's like, now I know. The secret's out, and but you always gotta go with your gut because you gotta never steer you wrong. And cops, like I said in the one video, cops they train on those courses where they they show a bad guy and a good guy together, and they got to shoot the bad guy and not shoot the good guy, and all those and the good guy might look like a bad guy, but it's a good guy and you can't shoot him, and they lose points if they shoot the good guy. So they try to fool the officers. They don't make him obviously the bad guy, and some they do, of course. Some they try to manipulate. They try to control and fool them and stuff like that. So, because in real life, that's how it is. You get fooled. Not always the bad guy is the bad guy. So, uh, but that's training your gut, your gut feeling. Because when you're in the field and you actually fire the gun, you can't put the bullet back in the gun. So whatever happens, happens. You know, and on the training field, you can shoot the bad guy, the good guy, and there's not a problem. I mean, you failed, but there's not a problem. So it's just that's how you train your gut. It's just like football. They go through all the training, they go all through the courses of the learning the plays, and so because when they're playing the game, they can't take out the X and O pamphlet and say, "Oh, that's me. I go there. I go there." They gotta know it here. They gotta know it. They gotta know before they get on that field. When the guy says blue X53, they have to know what blue X53 means and where their position in that play is and where they're supposed to end up so the ball is in their hands. you know so and that's all instinct, that's all gut. That's your gut, telling you which way to go. And sometimes they get it wrong, and that's the one that loses the game. The one that gets it right more wins the game. I mean, that's the idea. So, all training is every bit of doctor's training. How to handle a blood vessel that bursts. They do it on a cadaver. They do it in a classroom situation on a computer before they actually do it in an actual operating room, so that they don't kill the guy. Yeah, but that's training your gut. That's training because it's instinct. It becomes instinct. It's no longer your gut. Your gut tells you the vessel's going to bust, but your training tells you how to handle it. And it's just we have instincts, and we're taught through our society and through our education of our society to ignore those instincts. Uh, just like I don't want to bring them up. I hate talking about them, but a lot of people knew Trump was a bad bet. They voted for him, but they knew they just didn't want to vote for Kamala, a black woman, a woman. They just didn't want to vote for that. And they didn't care. But now they're like, yeah, I kind of had a feeling, because they knew. He had a first term, and he was horrible in his first term. So, it wasn't like it was out of osmosis. They knew something. They just ignored it. That's when you ignore your gut. It's like, that's when you pay the price. Like the cop, if he ignores his gut, he's going to shoot the good guy. You know, and it's just, and it's Seth MacFarlane ignored his gut, he would have been on one of those planes that went into the buildings, and he wouldn't be here. So, and his gut kind of forced him to not ignore it. It was that important, and your gut will do that. It'll make you really sick. Uh, Now, just yesterday, I went to the hospital. I thought I had a mini stroke. I lost my eyesight. I, I was on my iPad. I was trying to read it, and I couldn't see the words. It was, they, they, they were beyond blurry. And, you know, I have medical, I never had a stroke before, so I don't know. It wasn't like from experience. But my gut told me I was having a stroke. I went to the hospital. They did a CAT scan. They did a blood test. Everything came out fine. But now I have to see a neurologist, and they'll do more tests. And a lot of times the CAT scans don't show everything because it happened right away, and I went to the hospital right away. You gotta wait a few days for the CAT scan to catch it, to show it. And I'm gonna do that. I'm not giving up. Strokes are very serious. I know people that have strokes, and they're not fun. And they're curable if you can get them in time. Most people ignore them, ignore their gut, and they end up paralyzed. Uh, and I'm not ignoring it. I have insurance. I have the time. It's worth going to the doctors. I went to the hospital last night. It took about 8 hours at the hospital, just sitting there. I was sitting there on my iPad watching TV, just hanging out, waiting for them to do paperwork. Never ignore your gut.